So my magic wand would be basically to uplift the understanding about AI amongst the general society to, really enable people to avail themselves of opportunities to learn more about it and use it themselves and make it much more inclusive. I think what's happened is it's become something that is confined to a very narrow group of people who love it, but there's a lot of people that feel quite threatened by it. And for me, that's not good, right? So I don't want a world where people are afraid of the thing that I'm trying to build. So I really want to improve society's broader understanding of data. And, Raoul, I think people like yourself have a really big role to play in terms of uplifting society's data literacy and AI literacy. I think that's going to be really critical.
Welcome to Data and AI Mastery, the podcast where we bring you cutting-edge insights, practical advice, and inspiring stories from the leaders shaping the future of data and AI across the globe. I'm your host, Raoul Gabriel Irma, founder of Cambridge Spark, the leader in transformational data and AI upskilling, career development, and progression. In each episode, I will be diving into real-world case studies of companies harnessing the power of AI to drive innovation, reduce costs, and create new business opportunities. So whether you're an aspiring data scientist, AI engineer, or seasoned executive, this show is designed to give you the tools and knowledge to stay ahead in a world where data is transforming every aspect of business. Stay ahead, stay inspired, stay masterful. Welcome to Data and AI Mastery. Hi Ranil, how are you? Good to see you.
Hey Raoul, good to see you.
Happy Friday. Happy Friday. So Ranil, thank you for joining the podcast. I'm so excited to see you. You're a legend in the industry, so we are quite grateful to have you on today. And hey, let's kick off right away. I'm curious, what does it take to become a senior leader in the space? Because today you look after large teams and, you started as a grad. It's a really inspiring story. There's many grads that are starting at Lloyds Banking Group today, for example. So what does it take to go into a senior leadership position and look after, business strategy and multiple teams?
The first thing is, I think in my first few years, right, I was quite fortunate that I was surrounded by people that were a few years ahead of me who were doing quite well. Whether it was people with 3 or 4 years experience or even, my first few sort of managers. And they had basically 3 traits that I observed that made them stand out, which I copied. I shamelessly copied them, right? So one of them was, it was being really proactive, right? So think about the late 90s, right? So not many people really understood what data can do. And so what I saw where people did really well was when they were really proactive with shaping ideas, shaping proposals, shaping how can I help this business using data, using analytics, using algorithms, using models. How do I come up with ideas rather than wait for someone to ask me? So I think being really proactive was something I saw work for others. And so I really copied that. That was definitely the first one. The second kind of trait I observed, right, which again I shamelessly copied, was being really curious, right? So if I think back to some of the first models that I built, some of the people I worked with would build a model just based on only the data that was immediately in front of them, right? And the model will have a certain kind of outcome, right? Certain sort of, ability to predict things. But I observed others who would actually go the extra step and actually take a step back and really think through, what are all the signals that would be important in this model? Which ones have I got? If I haven't got it, how do I get that data? And they'd put a lot more work in acquiring data sets that were harder to get, and they'd build much better models. So just that curiosity around thinking, what else should be in this that I should use? So curiosity would be the second thing that I really observed, right? And then the third thing was this whole notion of continuous learning, right? So basically, for the last 25 years, right, literally every couple of years, everything changes. And some people were stuck in old ways of doing things. Others kept on learning new things, and they just forced themselves to learn, whether it's new coding languages, whether it was new techniques, whether it's understanding more data sets, new technologies, new software packages. They'd learn stuff a lot, and so that continuous learning thing. So I think from a behavioral perspective, I figured quite early on three things, right? Being proactive, being super curious, and continuous learning. Need to kind of do those, right? So that was kind of part of my, I think, my early career. And then, got to be honest, Raoul, the second part is luck, right? So I was really lucky early on in my career that I worked for really, I guess, you know, leaders that would see something in me and be willing to really have a bit of a bet. And so I was, I got some, a lot of support, a lot of mentoring early on by mainly some really strong female leaders. And so that part that's luck, right? You can't control that. What you can control though is maybe really think about who is the sort of person that you want to work for. Are they the sort of person that will nurture you and maybe bet on you to do something? So that's something you can probably take a bit of control of, is to look at the characters of the person that you're going to work for. So those are some of the things I kind of really advise anyone that's starting out their career to kind of really look at. One last thing I'd say is, in all the jobs I've had, right, there's been really good mentoring programs, career elevate programs, talent programs. Those things are great, but really, where I've seen people do really well, right, is where they're basically, regardless of all of that external sort of support, they've just basically really pushed their own career, right? They've made their own network, they've found their own mentors, and they've really tried to take the next step, would be something I'd say. And one last thing is, don't chase basically promotions or money. You've got to chase acquiring new skills. So I would see when I started out with a bunch of other people. Some of them got promotions really quickly, but into dead-end roles where they weren't learning new skills. Others took sideways moves and really built out their repository of skills. We now call that career equity, right? They focused on building career equity, right? And they thought about skills as something that has a net present value that you can actually build a lot of, right? And so I also did that. I took lots of sideways moves early on to acquire more skills rather than just going for a promotion. So that's probably the fourth point I'd sort of leave with any of the younger colleagues listening to this call.
That's fascinating. So let me play this back. I mean, I was quite intrigued when you said a bit of luck, because it feels like someone like you is creating their own luck through proactivity, as you mentioned, as a really important attribute. So it's really valuable advice: proactivity, curiosity, and learning mindset. I'd love to take you a little bit to your role at Lloyds Banking Group. So just for the audience, can you talk us through the key responsibilities of what it's like to be, the CDAO at Lloyds Banking Group? Because it's a big role and really prestigious. So can you help demystify what are your responsibilities and what it involves?
Great. So the role CDAO, Chief Data and Analytics Officer. So it's basically you are the person that is ultimately accountable for delivering, the organization's data and AI strategy, right? So you've got to firstly conceive of what it is and then deliver it using your own teams and people that report directly to you, as well as others that don't. So on the positive side, it's really clear that you are the ultimate accountable person, right? So I've had data and analytics leadership roles in the past where there's been many pretenders. There's been many people who had similar sounding names and, things are overlapped. With the CDAO, it's very clear, it's you, right? It's all on you. And that's really positive in that it's very clear that you have the ultimate authority and mandate on data. So that's the positive side. On the flip side, though, everything is also on you means that when things go wrong, it's also on you, right? So it's a role for, and unless you're working for a greenfield startup which has been built AI native, if you're working in legacy business, you've got to have a thick skin, right? So there is a lot of work to be done to transform organizations, right? A lot of it is moving from legacy to, kind of cloud and, going from, old types of data science to much more modern techniques, all of that is quite hard work. And so it is a role where basically there's a lot to be done. There's a lot to be done, right?
Yeah, that's really interesting. Hearing you out, it made me think of the quote, with great power comes great responsibility, right? So it definitely feels that way. So could you, just to demystify a little bit, what does a typical week look like for you at Lloyds Banking Group?
Sure. So I can share with you my week this week, right? So we are in the midst of a pretty massive migration program where we're moving our on-premise data, right? So we had data that was sitting in, Hadoop clusters. It was, a big thing 10 years ago, now not so much. And we're moving that data into our cloud platform. And so we not only have to move the data into the cloud, we've also got to rebuild all of the reports and models and, dashboards and all the analytical processes where we've got to rebuild all of that. But we have a very finite time to get that stuff done through, right? So a big chunk of the week has been working with the team. We're right at the tail end of that and just kind of trying to unblock things that are getting in the way, right? So that's kind of been a big chunk. We're also setting up a AI center of excellence. So we've hired a new person, external from Amazon, as our sort of chief AI officer. So helping him set up his AI center of excellence. That's kind of been a big focus, right? And then, part of that is we've got this whole strategy around AI where we're trying to scale AI, but we want to do it consistently across the organization. So we're going to work with all sorts of different parts of the organization where, kind of testing into some new agentic AI type capabilities with one of our partners, Google. So again, working on that with the chief AI chap, that's been a big part of it. And then also, data risk and data management is a big part as well, right? So I've been working really closely with our colleagues in our second line to really understand what are the drivers of data risk at a large organization like Lloyds. Are we really clear on those? Where are we? Have we got the right actions in place? So again, the whole data risk agenda, the data management agenda has been a big area of focus as well. I've spent a bit of time this week talking to our graduates. So we have a pretty scaled graduate program at Lloyds. It's like up to 100. So I spent time early in the week really talking the graduates through our data and AI strategies. So they're our future. We've got this pipeline of really talented young, kind of data people coming through. So getting them really clear about what we're trying to do has been a big focus. And then the rest of it is, as you can imagine, as a large organization like Lloyds, we've got to really keep an eye on some really large programs as well. So that's sort of pretty much the sum of what it is. So ranges from big migration programs to AI strategy and implementation to data risk and data management to emerging talent.
Yeah, wow, what a week you're having, Ranil. That's really exciting. So for someone that loves problem solving and empowering people, definitely sounds like you have a lot on. So thank you for sharing that. Well, you've talked about the sort of the tech transformation going on-premise to cloud and a bit about the AI strategy. So maybe that's kind of like a natural sort of way for us to talk about that. So I'll start with the first project you mentioned, kind of like the Hadoop migration to the sort of being on the cloud. Can you walk us through what's the business case? Why would you do it? What are the benefits? Did it require convincing a lot of people to go and do this big tech transformation? If you can shed a bit of light.
Yeah, so look, I probably wouldn't want to characterize it as on-premise to cloud. What I want to characterize it is as it's basically a whole strategy around converging and simplifying our sort of data estate. So when I started at Lloyds, we had Lloyds is a very complicated business, right? It's Lloyds Banking Group. So there's Lloyds Bank, Halifax, Bank of Scotland, MBNA, Scottish Widows, bunch of insurance companies. And so as a result of that fragmentation, we have lots of data silos. So the strategies around, and there's a lot, right? It's probably double digits. And really the strategy is to say, we're probably not going to converge on one, but we need to have like no more than two or three. And so really it's been around how do we actually converge so that we have, a much simpler data estate to manage. That's kind of been a big drive of it. We're super keen to really leverage public cloud. So storage is cheaper. It's easier to scale up compute when you need it. So that's another part of it. And then a lot of our on-premise legacy platforms are basically out of date, right? So we had to update them anyway. Felt like the right time to move to cloud. So that's kind of the core of it. So it's a process that it's really around just modernizing your data estate is how I describe that. We are really keen to also use a lot of the the latest tools, right? So basically there are some incredible tools from, the big hyperscalers, right? So think about all of the capabilities like OpenAI or Gemini, consume those much more cost effectively through cloud.
That makes a lot of sense. So one is simplification of the data estate. Two is achieving enablement so you can tap into kind of like all the modern services and tools available. And then three, you mentioned cost efficiency purely out of being able to use flexible public cloud infrastructure. On those three, what are sort of metrics or KPIs that you track or you need to report on as part of that sort of transformation that you might be able to share?
So look, one of them is basically how we're simplifying our estate, right? So I want to have a smaller number of systems of insight is what we call them. So we had like double digits. I don't want to have double. It's very expensive, right? If you've got every flavor of data platform, you need different support teams. It's expensive. There's just a lot of fragmentation, a lot of variation, right? So trying to reduce your total cost of ownership is a big driver. Really managing a lot of the risks around currency. So a lot of these on-premise platforms are out of date. So we need to, or will be out of date. So before they become out of date, how to ensure that they're on a much more modern platform. Really trying to converge, right? So if you've got lots of different data platforms, you've got lots of different data models. So having a much more simplified approach to organizing your data is also a big driver of it. And so we've moved to a model where we are organizing our data around what we call data products. And so that means that you don't have to duplicate your data. It's much more reusable. So that means that you're going to have lower costs, right? So otherwise what would happen is you'd have this proliferation of duplicate copies of data on the cloud. And even though cloud's cheap, if you have lots and lots of copies, you're going to start to like really erode that cost advantage.
Makes a lot of sense. So it's kind of like removal of technical debt, inertia to kind of like go faster. Great. So next, let's talk about AI, right? Because you mentioned the AI strategy. And of course, in the industry right now, a lot of people, at the board, C-suite, and individuals are trying to figure out what does it mean, what to do. So I'd love to hear your take on how do you think about AI in the industry and at Lloyds Banking Group? Where do you see the opportunities? What excites you?
So our approach at Lloyds is to ensure that what we're doing is scalable, right? So we're building, we've built, our sort of generative AI foundations, which means that we can start to scale capabilities in a consistent way. We also have really clear architectural principles around whether we build stuff ourselves on our own stack or whether we buy. And we have what we call a control tower mechanism, which is an organizational-wide approach to ensure that wherever you are at Lloyds Bank, with any of the brands, if you want to do a AI use case, it's funneled through this control tower. We assess it to understand, is it going to create a pattern that we can scale and reuse? Does this pattern already exist? If so, let's not do it again. Or is this something we should build versus buy? So it means that we've got a much more coordinated approach to really scaling things. And then we've already agreed what the key areas of focus should be, right? So we want to focus this on engineering skills, so things like the software development lifecycle, various code co-pilots, code translators, so a whole bunch of capabilities around engineering. We have a vertical that's focused on support and tools for branch RMs and contact center stuff. So things like knowledge management, various summarization tools, the ability to do post-call, training and teaching, quality assessments, etc. We have a set of capabilities that are all about automating various components of the back office. So things like underwriting complaints, claims, KYC. So they all have very similar patterns that you can use. And then finally, there's a set of capabilities that we want to deploy that expose generative capabilities directly to customers. Now, that last piece, we are really approaching with caution until we have all of the guardrails in place.
Yeah, that's great. So let me play this back because it sounds like you guys are ahead of the curve compared to a lot of organizations. So that's fascinating. So one, it sounds like there is sort of a bottom-up approach to innovation and surfacing out sort of ideas and problem solving, but with the right sort of governance in place, the sort of town concept that you mentioned. So that's really cool. But how do you pair that with top-down expectations? Can you talk us through, are people asking you about ROI? Are they expecting something? Or it's kind of like, we're just experimenting here and, let's go with the flow a little bit?
Yeah, so obviously our people like our chief financial officer, very interested in, show me the money, show me the numbers. But what we said though is, this is early days, right? We're like 2 years in, and really what we've focused on so far is efficiency and productivity metrics. So for example, if we build a code translator, we're able to demonstrate that that improves the pace of translating code by 30 or 40%. And so therefore that justifies why we do it. Or if we build a categorizer and summarizer tool that's able to go through complaints, categorize them, which understand what the complaint is, and then summarize who needs to do what action. Again, it's about making our complaints team more productive, right? So at the moment, in terms of this stage, we're very much focused on every use case, being able to demonstrate whether there is an efficiency or productivity benefit. And part of it is because most of the use cases at this very early stage are really focused on doing things we do today, but doing them better, faster, and cheaper with AI, right? So it's like very much the augment phase. What we're rapidly moving towards, and we'll get there in the course of 25, is reimagining, where we say, you know what, we're going to start with a blank piece of paper and reimagine this whole process bottoms up using AI as a capability. That's when I'd expect to see more of the revenue type numbers, incremental revenue. And then also when we start to expose these capabilities directly to customers as well, again, that's where I expect to see incremental growth and incremental revenue. So that's kind of more of a 25 thing. At this stage, we've been able to justify everything that we've done on the basis that there's a productivity and efficiency benefit which we can quantify.
Fantastic. Maybe more of a philosophical question related to the idea of reimagining the organization. The innovator dilemma, like things are working, we can do them better. What are the incentives to reimagine, which, might take you away from, I guess, the core business, what's delivering cash and working? How do you deal with this balancing act between, things are going well, but also we need to reimagine ourselves because, things are changing quickly. How do you think about this kind of like tension almost?
Yeah, so look, I think this is one where you have to solve with education and learning, right? So if you're a legacy business, like a bank that's made money for 350 years a certain way, your incentive to throw that in the bin and start with a blank piece of paper is pretty minimal, because you're always going to think, you know what, it's not broken. Why am I trying to fix it? And that's why, things like the head start that, neobanks made with their customer experience compared to the big legacy banks, there was just so much, kind of incumbent thinking, right? If you think what happened to Kodak or Blockbuster, it's the same incumbent thinking. I think that's well understood now, right? So the whole innovator's dilemma, there's been, so much written about it in the last 25 years, right? So it's now well known. And one of the things that, I feel quite strongly is you've got to get your senior leadership to really understand that, to think, you know what, my job is to look at how I'm doing things and basically reimagine it in the context of these new technologies, or watch while someone else does that and watch my business shrink. And so we're putting in quite a lot of effort and focus on, upskilling and training our senior leaders, our business leaders on reimagine versus augment, right? Look at something, what would it look like if you augmented that using AI? What would it look like if you reimagined that using AI? What do you think is going to give you the biggest ROI, right? So that's the sort of, kind of frame-breaking thinking that we want to instill in our senior leaders. And we've done lots of training, and our CEO and the exec team really role model that. They spent probably like 7 or 8 hours with, the various PhDs in my team, the chief AI officer, going through that. And we've rolled that out to the senior leaders as well. And what we want to do is really build on that with some much more structured learning. But I think that's the way to do it, Raoul, is to really get your top business leaders thinking about how to reframe things rather than just augment.
Ranil, let's now move to kind of like the quick fire round questions. So my first question is, how do you yourself stay up to date as a leader in the industry? What's your go-to
what?
place and what do you do?
I find the easiest way to keep up to date is to surround myself with really smart people. I always like to be the dumbest person in the room, right? If I am, I know I've got the right team. So I think that's probably the main way. And then secondly, I listen to lots of podcasts. I read a lot. I attend, like every couple of nights, there'll be some sort of event in London where you get to meet your peers. So talking to my peers from other industries, not just from banking, talking to colleagues from other parts of the world, tapping the brains of all of our partners, whether it's, the hyperscalers, whether it's the consultants. So it's just like talking and surrounding myself with people that know more.
I love your answer because I can't help but think about the 3 traits you mentioned earlier, because it sounds like proactivity, to surround yourself with experts, curiosity and learning mindsets. So that's kind of like the secret, isn't it? My second question, maybe a curveball question. What is a contrarian view you have in the industry? So a contrarian view in the industry, if any.
So my contrarian view is, I think AI will transform society, but I think there is a role to ensure that we transform it for the better of everyone. And that's what I want to do, right? The purpose of Lloyds Banking Group is helping Britain prosper. I want to help Britain prosper with data and AI. I want to, what I don't want to do is, automate all human work. I don't believe in that. I want to use AI to make our lives better and more enriched.
Great. That's a beautiful answer, Ranil. Thank you. And look, like final question, if you had a magic wand, let's pretend, there's a magic wand here. What would be the number one issue you'd like to solve, whether it's at work or in the industry?
So my magic wand would be basically to uplift the understanding about AI amongst the general society, to, really enable people to avail themselves of opportunities to learn more about it and use it themselves, and make it much more inclusive. I think what's happened is it's become something that is confined to a very narrow group of people who love it, but there's a lot of people that feel quite threatened by it. And for me, that's not good, right? So I don't want a world where people are afraid of the thing that I'm trying to build. So I really want to improve society's broader understanding of data. And, Raoul, I think people like yourself have a really big role to play in terms of uplifting society's data literacy and AI literacy. I think that's going to be really critical.
Beautiful. Education. And thank you. Yeah, it is a mission to help the workforce succeed with data and AI skills. So I'm working on it, Ranil. Thank you for the support. So look, three quick final questions. First one,